Hello, friends. Katie Linendahl here, consumer technology expert and your moderator for MetLife TTX Talks. Hopefully, you've been tuning into our TTX conversations. And yes, we've got one more for you today. But also, while I have you, might I note, we would love to invite you to join us for the TTX conference taking place on October 11th and 12th. You can register right now by scanning this QR code, super easy. And also to note that this year's event is super special because it is not only the 5th annual, but the theme is the humanity imperative, achieving STEM equity in the AI age. So be sure to register now so make sure you don't miss more from world-class thought leaders on this topic. All right, let's jump right in with another special MetLife TTX talk. Today, Kristine Poznanski from MetLife will be chatting with Dr. Erin Macdonald. Now, Erin's got a title that many people can claim. She is an official science consultant for the ever-expanding Star Trek universe and is currently working on all shows in development. She received an undergraduate in physics and astrophysics and mathematics at the University of Colorado at Boulder, as well as a PhD in astrophysics at the University of Glasgow in Scotland. She's also done extensive research into gravitational waves. As you can hear, she's qualified. All right, Kristine, looking forward to your interview. Why don't we just jump right into that first question for Erin? Go ahead and take it away.
You've shared, and I found this fact fascinating, that Catherine Janeway, the starship captain played by Kate Mulgrew in Star Trek Voyager, really was a very early inspiration for you. Can you talk a little bit about how seeing women scientists and leaders in entertainment helped inspire you to pursue your career in STEM?
Yeah, I think so many of us, we're all born naturally scientists, right? We explore the world around us. We're trying to understand how things work. And then that kind of enthusiasm can come and go, but I do feel enthusiasm for space, enthusiasm for, even dinosaurs, right? There's just some things out there that continue to fascinate people. And I grew up in a time, it was a lot of science fiction. For me, my very first inspiration was really Dana Scully. As a little redheaded kid, I got to see even just ads of a redheaded woman. It was a huge TV show. You couldn't miss it. And she was just the coolest person I had ever seen. And I just wanted to be Dana Scully. And then kind of going through my life, I was interested in a lot of things. I was always interested in film and television. I was obsessed with movies. I just watched a ton of TV. It's all I wanted to do. I thought everyone was like that. Everything I was into. But I still loved space. I was just fascinated by it, and that never went away. Another film that came out when I was growing up was Contact, and that had a woman scientist, Dr. Ellie Arroway. Another really inspiring woman who was not just a scientist, but like a complex character. And, you got to see a lot of her life and thoughts and background, which was really rare at the time. You didn't really get to see that. And so as I went through, I decided to study astronomy, and astrophysics particularly, a little bit because that's what Dana Scully studied when she was an undergraduate.
The truth comes out.
Yeah, exactly. And then I discovered Star Trek when I was in college, and Captain Janeway really captured that for me. Like, she became a mentor. She was the type of leader I wanted to be. She had a scientific background, but the way she balanced like her femininity, but also like her scientific interests, and also trying to maintain the morale of a tiny crew. For those people who don't know, like, the whole plot of Voyager is that they get lost in a part of the galaxy that has never been explored before. And so seeing how a woman reacts to that situation as a leader and as a scientist was just hugely inspiring to me. So all of that background just to say that, like, I do think it's so important to have representation on television, because it was seeing those characters that made me think I could see myself in those roles. And that's, what ultimately inspired me to pursue those different careers.
That's awesome. And I think now for women thinking about careers in STEM, seeing both those characters, but seeing real life people in their walks of life have that similar impact and effect. I know that when you studied your undergrad at CU Boulder, that the field was incredibly male dominated. How did that affect your overall learning experience? As we just talked about, you could see the images on TV, but in your real life experience, you didn't see that.
It's really hard. I think
Mhm.
it can be lonely. And I think the biggest impact for me, because I was lucky to be surrounded, but by mostly very supportive peers, and I had a lot of friends in the field. But it was the lack of mentorship that I think I really struggled with. That there just weren't women in my field that I could point to, as we talked about, and just see myself in. That there were women who were above me and kind of in that career trajectory, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I was at a different point in my life. And so it wasn't able to sort of have someone to look at and say, oh, that's the type of career, that's the type of life path that I'd like to follow. And that can be really hard if you don't have that, and you don't see a natural way for you to make the choices that you want to make. That can be demoralizing at times and pretty difficult, so you kind of have to piecemeal people's lives and advice and figure out what works best for you, and there's a lot of trial and error involved.
So is that primarily how you overcame those challenges, by piecing together kind of through different folks and mentors along the way? Or is there something else that you did to overcome that challenge, or advice you'd offer for others that feel similar challenges?
Yeah, I think that learning how to be vulnerable and how to reach out to these superiors, like whether that's a direct line
Yeah.
of support, or just kind of other people that you might have met in different fields, or that you might feel a kinship with, who might have a few more years experience. Just really talk to them, about what decisions you're trying to make. And you might realize that people have been at those crossroads before, and maybe they just took the other fork, but
Yeah.
they know what it feels like to make that decision. And so really opening those conversations with people can lead to not just great advice to take in, but also great relationships that you'll hold, your whole life. I have a peer who, when I was thinking of leaving academia, she was in the same position and she
Mm.
decided to stay, and we just track each other's life careers, as the other what if I did this type situation.
I love that, and I love the idea of vulnerability and asking, and feeling okay with showing that vulnerability. So you mentioned that you were thinking about leaving academia. You actually formally did that in 2014, although I know you still continued to teach physics, at local community colleges and museums. Why was that something that was important for you as you went on to pursue and discover kind of pop culture and how to engage students in STEM?
I was teaching Astronomy 101 at the community college, and I was kind of talking about exoplanets, planets that go around other stars, and that we had just discovered a star system that had two stars that had a planet going around it. And I offhand made the comment like, oh, it's like Star Wars. It's like Tatooine, Luke's homeworld with the two setting suns. And like the whole class perked up.
Mm.
And then they started going like, well, okay, but like, would it be a desert planet? Would it have life on it? Could people live on it? Would the sunsets look like that? And even though it seems like a diversion, that's still all the questions and the mindset you want a scientific class to be asking. And so at that moment, I realized the power of using science fiction as an entry point, because it suddenly makes it familiar. It gives a reference point that the students might not otherwise have.
So powerful, and such a way to connect on a common footing that folks may
Yeah.
not even have realized that they shared that mutual interest. That being said, I'm sure there's now a big difference between the world of academia and Hollywood. And what did that transition period look like for you as you found your way to your current work, which we'll talk about next?
When I left teaching wholesale, leaving the museums and community colleges, I really missed it. And so while I was working as an engineer, I started giving talks at sci fi conventions. and things like, local Comic-Cons and those sort of events. And I would give panels on the science behind science fiction. And I would give talks on like how time travel would work. And that's kind of the field of my PhD. And so, and I would get great audiences for that. I ended up moving to Los Angeles because, again, I loved film and TV. And at the time in my life, I was like, oh, I'm an adult. I can go do that. so, so I got a job at LA Air Force Base, which moved me out to Los Angeles. And because I'd been doing these conventions for about 5-7 years at that point, I had met a lot of people in the entertainment industry. And once I was out here, there was a lot of like, oh, my friend's working on this sci-fi project, or I'm writing a pilot. Can you help me with some questions? And so I started to get into the loop of working with writers and just generally kind of building a network in that fold. And yeah, it is a transition. There are some similarities. There are mostly differences, but I would say the similarities, I mean, we all learn trial by fire how to navigate politics and how important networking is and how important it is to be easy to work with. And so just kind of learning as you go.
What about that role as a science advisor made you most excited, beyond the fact that you were now working with the group that you had admired from such a little age?
Yeah, it never stops being cool. I mean, I had Star Trek tattoos before I started working with them. Like, yeah, that is a big deal. But I think what was so exciting for me was the chance to be a part of a legacy. That one of the first jobs I got as a science advisor before I was like brought in wholesale across the whole franchise was just to help out with one season of Star Trek Discovery, where they were doing some stuff that had to do with dilithium. And dilithium was like a fictional thing that lives in the Star Trek universe, but it's been around since 1966. And so trying to like and the science of that and dig into all this lore, but then be able to add to that canon and be able to help create stories in this universe that people know and love and have loved for so long was just so cool. And yeah, I mean, I'm really honored like that. I'm the first woman science advisor for Star Trek, which is awesome and an honor as well.
That's amazing. How do you hope that girls and young women today respond to women in STEM roles being depicted on screen like you were inspired? Is there a difference? Should we be further along in that? What's your hope for them?
Well, what's great is that Star Trek continues to push those boundaries of representation that it's always been known for. Back in having a Black woman on the bridge of the Enterprise in 1966 was a huge deal and is credited by, astronauts and actors as, hugely inspirational to them. And that legacy continues. In Star Trek Discovery, they have a Black woman as a captain. They have kind of the first non-binary character in Star Trek Discovery. And so just expanding that level of representation so more people could see themselves other than just, a white cisgendered redhead girl in the 90s getting to see herself. Now we get a more swath of folks who are able to see themselves represented, which I just think is great and something we need to keep pushing towards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about your production company now, Space-Time Productions. It released its first shortlist film last summer and has since won some impressive awards on the festival circuit. So congratulations for that. The mission of Space-Time Productions is to uplift the voices of traditionally marginalized populations in the genre of space. Why is that representation such an important part of the work in the entertainment industry and that you're focused on?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, first of all, thank you. It's like such an early day company and
You
we're just
hear it
getting our
and you
feet
say, oh, wow, that is mine. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, so some of the similarities that we've talked about, in this conversation between academia and Hollywood has been the lack of representation, and particularly behind the scenes. And so getting into the industry, one of the first kind of big events that I was able to do was with Gina Davis, who has the Gina Davis Institute for Gender and Media. And the reason I got connected with them was because they studied a phenomenon called the Scully effect about women my age who, if you watched The X-Files as a young woman, you were statistically significantly more likely to become a scientist than women who didn't. And so that was like a very clear scientific demonstration of the importance of representation. But they also really study just gender parity across Hollywood. And so that's kind of how I got interested in that and how we can start to improve the behind the scenes. And I started noticing, especially like film credits, you might have these great, I mean, thankfully now we're getting great kick butt characters, and you get to see women, wield swords and blaster rifles and all those things. But you look at the credits and they're still mostly written by men and mostly produced and developed by men. And so I was having a conversation with some friends of mine, and I had started this company mostly just to manage all my consulting stuff, but it was still an entertainment company.
Yeah.
And we were kind of having that conversation of like, we're like really smart.
Right.
We're all kind of talented, and at a point in our career, we're like, we kind of know how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
What if we just made a movie? What if we just started doing that? And so, yeah, Every Morning was our first kind of short film. I was the lead producer. It was about, it's a LGBTQ focused time loop story. So it's very, it's sci-fi. Has a LGBTQ themes, which aren't really seen that often. It's all women led. We had 60% women behind the scenes, 10% gender nonconforming, and it was just a great experience. And the idea was, working in Hollywood, short films are really like a business card. Like because you could be working on like a Marvel film, but you'll be the 82nd person on a crew list.
Right.
And with a short film, you can point to it and be like, no, I was the lighting technician. Like I did all the lighting for that. And so it was important to me to give people an opportunity who normally aren't first on the call list when people are looking for folks, because they're calling their buddies and people they're working with.
Congratulations again. And it's so inspiring. And as you talk about on a short film, how the lighting director is the lighting director. I imagine that there are many kind of that now look to you as a mentor and a role model. And that was one of the biggest themes of our TTX conference last year, really around mentorship, sponsorship, allyship in helping to develop the next pipeline of talent and making sure that we continue to inspire those women. So what advice would you give to early career applicants in terms of finding an employer who prioritizes those three pillars?
I mean, that's a great question. And it's difficult. I mean, I've had great employers and I've had not great employers, and you can kind of learn as you go what works and what to look for. But I think the best thing to do is, sounds cliche, but it's really, look at what people do, not what they say. And so look at who they're inviting to meetings, who they're promoting, who they're emphasizing, who they're, showcasing, and not just what they say in the job interview, because you can be sold a great bill of goods, but that might not actually be how the environment is. And so looking at who gets promoted, what the C-suite looks like, all of those are just important. And of course, we still have a long way to go when it comes to representation. And so sometimes it might take another 10, 20 years for things to shake out. But frankly, those moves should be being made. and I know women at the C-suite level who kill it when they're given that opportunity. And so So, it's so important to look at what companies do, and then on a much more like micro level, just within your own chain, because I've been parts of huge, huge corporations before. Sometimes it's just that bubble that you're going to be working in. And just, I've been hired as the only woman in multiple groups before, but just seeing how comfortable people are with that conversation and not, coming in confrontationally and being like, hey, I don't know if you guys didn't notice, but like, you don't have any women here.
Right.
Just say, like, start to emphasize. And I think that was, just to kind of rewind a little bit, like, that was one of those moments I had actually when I was in academia as a researcher. I was leaving academia, and one of my supervisors, who was a professor in the department, just said that he had realized what a loss it is, because he knew, now that he had me in the group, how having people from different backgrounds just contributes to better conversations and better business decisions. And because you have people who kind of raise flags in an early stage setting where stuff can be adjusted and moved around. So it is difficult, and we've all found ourselves in bad situations before, but trying to speak up when you can, it's not always possible, and pivot and have the courage to change career paths if you're able. That's something, anytime things haven't been working for me, I've always tried to find a path that would work better, whether it's the same career field or just burning it to the ground and moving to Hollywood.
There you go.
Starting from scratch.
Pick up and go. But no, you actually, when you talk about your career path, I love how you found kind of the adjacencies on the peripheral to take it one step further, right? And continuing to build upon really the successes you had throughout. If you looked back and you talked about just recently, kind of when you were back in academia, what's the one thing that you would be most proud of in your journey that you, as your younger self, accomplished?
I think I'm most proud of I somehow found the courage to just carve my own path. That, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have an easy career direction where it was, if you do X, Y, and Z, you'll end up here. It
Yeah.
was a lot of trial and error, and just learning and being humble and realizing that I have more to learn. I'm always learning, and being easy to work with and show up on time will
Yeah.
get you so far. and,
Yeah.
and then really you can pretty much do anything. If something isn't working for you, just being ready to learn, being professional, showing up when needed, you can carve your own path. And it's not always easy, but I'm really proud that that I was able to find that strength, and then hopefully other people can look at it and just realize that, yeah, who says you can't go be the first woman science advisor of the entire Star Trek franchise?
That's right.
It happens. Yeah. And yeah, just to kind of add a little bit, like, I think one of those, looking back on those inflection points, one of those big ones was just sending an email to a senior person that I had met to say, hey, can we have a meeting? And that's so scary. And sometimes we feel like we can't do that, but that could change your whole life.
Is there any other closing thoughts or advice that you would want to share with, again, folks that are either thinking about a career in STEM or very young in career?
Kind of bringing all of it together. When I was working at museums, learning how to say, I don't know, I've learned the power of that. And it's so easy to say that, but really to be sitting in a big meeting as a junior person and someone asks you a question and you really don't know the answer, just being able to say, look, I don't know that. That's a great question. I'll look into that and get back to you.
Yeah.
Means that the next time you do answer, you're answering with more authority because people know you're not making it up. And so, yeah, learning how to say, I don't know, will get you pretty far in life, and as scary as it may be at times.
That's awesome. This has been so inspiring for me. Where can others go to learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, so my company is called Spacetime Productions, so you can check that out online, spacetimeproductions.net. I'm also on Instagram, but it's mostly just Star Trek nerdy science stuff at Dr. Erin Mac, but you can contact me through there. And other than that, yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of working on continuing to work on Star Trek, and hopefully you'll continue to see my name in credits and films going forward. We'll see.
I am sure that we will. So thank you so much, Erin, for speaking with me today, for sharing your amazing journey with the team here. I think how you demystify science and engaging with audiences in such an approachable and accessible way is really an important step for gender equality in STEM fields. And thank you again for the discussion and taking the time to be with us today. And I really look forward to seeing your name in lights in the future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.